I have no idea what a mainline Sonic game is. There are a ton of Sonic games out there, from platformers, a murder mystery visual novel, and Sonic Schoolhouse, a terrifying horror game. Over the years, I and tons of other people on the internet have referred to a specific group of Sonic games as mainline Sonic games. You know, the big major Sonic releases, games like the original Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic Adventure, and Sonic Frontiers. However, after watching videos like Misali's series where he questions how many Super Mario games there are, I've been thinking, what even is a mainline Sonic game? First, I guess I should lay down a set of rules for what a mainline Sonic game is. I'd say a few classifications that most of us can agree on are: 1. The game was developed primarily by Sonic Team, or a game with significant involvement from a core Sonic Team member. 2. The game expands upon the Sonic mythos in a substantial way. And 3. The game is a platformer. There are some other things you can take into account, like Sonic being in the title of the game, and the game being marketed as a big release. Next, let's run down a list of games that I think most Sonic fans would consider to be mainline. Those games being Sonic 1, 2, CD, 3, Sonic & Knuckles, Adventure, Adventure 2, Heroes, 06, Unleashed, Colors, Generations, Lost World, Mania, Forces, and Frontiers, for a total of 16 games. However, I would like to note a few interesting things about the list already. The first being Sonic CD. For years, Sonic CD existed in this weird limbo where many fans considered it to be a part of the classic Sonic series that started on the Genesis, but it rarely got the same amount of love or attention that those games got. Sonic Mega Collection, the quintessential Sonic game collection, featured Sonic 1, Sonic 2, and the two-part duo of Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles, the 4 games that many would consider to be the mainline classic Sonic games. However, Mega Collection did not feature Sonic CD. Now, Sonic CD was originally supposed to be on Sonic Mega Collection, but due to technical issues with emulating the game, it wasn't included. But I just think it's a funny coincidence that the figurative half-brother of the classic Sonic series didn't end up on the collection with all of its siblings. Sonic CD did eventually get put in a collection, that being my beloved Sonic Gems collection, but it's just interesting how many of the compilations that featured the other 4 classic Sonic games did not feature Sonic CD. Sonic Jam on the Sega Saturn didn't have Sonic CD, the updated version of Sonic Mega Collection, Sonic Mega Collection Plus on the PS2 and Xbox didn't have Sonic CD, and Sonic Classic Collection on the DS didn't have Sonic CD either. For a long time, Sonic CD was just kinda, off to the side somewhere. Then we get to Sonic Generations, a big run-through of Sonic's past, and again Sonic CD got skipped over. Now, Sonic Generations did include a rival boss fight with Metal Sonic in the game, which was really cool, but it is still a little sad we didn't get a full level based on Stardust Speedway. Then, finally, in 2022, we got Sonic Origins, a collection which featured not only Sonic 1, 2, and Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but also Sonic CD. They even explicitly placed it in the timeline after Sonic 1, but before Sonic 2. At least to me, this was full confirmation that Sonic CD was a part of the classic Sonic series on the Genesis, and also a mainline Sonic game. The second interesting topic is Sonic 3 and Knuckles. For years, there's been debate amongst the community as to what Sonic 3 and Knuckles even is. Is it one game split up into 2 parts, or 2 games that make up a duology? Those in favor of saying Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles are just one game split into 2 parts commonly cite that originally the game was supposed to be released as one game, but because there were so many ideas during development and the project was so large in scope, Sonic 3 ended up being split into 2 games. Those in favor of saying Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles are 2 games bring up the point that intentions don't matter as much as reality, and the reality is that these games were originally released separately, and as a consumer, you had to buy both games separately. I think this debate was a whole lot more interesting before the release of Sonic Origins, because before that game came out, Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles were often considered to be separate games in various collections and re-releases, although collections would often give you the ability to lock the games together. According to my fans, it's one game split into 2 parts, so technically by their logic, there would only be 15 mainline Sonic games. For the purposes of this video, I'm just going to consider Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles as one game, because that seems to be the general consensus. So we've already had to adjust our list to be 15 games instead of 16. But now that we have the list of games, I guess it's time to talk about some games that notably aren't on this list. The first being Sonic the Hedgehog 4. I mean, it's right there in the title of the game. It's supposed to be the 4th game in the classic Sonic series, which is mainline, but whether Sonic 4 is mainline or not is questionable for a lot of fans. A few possible reasons for this questionability are because, 1, a lot of people don't like Sonic 4. Let's be real, if this game was as good as, say, Sonic Mania, you can bet that this game would be considered mainline by the fanbase. But because it isn't, a lot of people are iffy on this game's status as mainline or not. 2, while Sonic Team, the core development team behind many of the other mainline Sonic games, did play a role in the making of Sonic 4, the game was primarily developed by Dimps, who are responsible for several of the portable Sonic games. And 3, there's evidence to believe that Sonic 4 was originally just going to be a mobile game, not the big new entry in the classic Sonic series. Because of all these reasons, Sonic 4, in the eyes of a lot of people in the fanbase, should have its mainline card revoked. Another really notable game that isn't on this list is Shadow 05. From a title perspective, this game has a lot less of a reason to be deemed mainline. Sonic isn't even in the title, and Sonic plays a noticeably small role in the game. Instead, Shadow the Hedgehog is the main character, and we join him on his journey to learn more about himself, following his quote-unquote death at the end of Sonic Adventure 2 and his subsequent return in Sonic Heroes, albeit with some massive amnesia. Despite Shadow 05 being Shadow's story, it's worth noting that Shadow is a really crucial character in the Sonic mythos, and his darker, edgier characterization in Shadow 05 would set the tone for his character's personality in the future. Sonic Heroes introduced a new plot point, the question of whether or not this Shadow is the original Shadow from SA2 or an android, and Shadow 05 finally answered that. So you can't act like this game isn't at least somewhat important to the narrative of the franchise. Also, Shadow 05 is a platformer that was developed by Sonic Team. This is some of the most solid pieces of evidence to support the case of Shadow 05 being mainline. Shadow 05 wasn't some niche handheld release that Sega gave to another company. Sonic Team themselves made this as the next big game in the series, released on the 3 major home platforms at the time. Funnily enough, I think the strongest case Shadow 05 has for being mainline actually comes from a completely different game, the newly released Sonic X Shadow Generations. Shadow Generations deals with Black Doom, the main antagonist of Shadow 05, and the events of Shadow Generations directly tie in with the events of Sonic Generations, a game I'm sure everyone can consider mainline. Actually, now that I think about it, let's talk about Sonic X Shadow Generations. Now that Sonic X Shadow Generations exists, are the original Sonic Generations and Sonic X Shadow Generations both mainline? I mean, to be fair, the new content in the Shadow Generations portion of SXSG is more than enough to be considered its own game. Obviously, it'd be grossly redundant to have both Sonic X Shadow Generations and the original Generations in a list of mainline Sonic games, so would it make more sense to just completely get rid of the original Generations? I don't know, that just doesn't feel right. You know what else doesn't feel right? Sonic Mania. So I and a lot of other people consider this game to be mainline, but it does have some things that brings its mainline status into question. It was developed by Christian Whitehead, Headcanon, and Pagoda West Games, not Sonic Team. Mania does introduce the Phantom Ruby, and the game directly ties in with Sonic Forces, so Mania does fulfill the expanding the narrative requirement, and it is a platformer obviously, so it does fulfill the genre requirement too. So, I don't know, is this game mainline? It only fulfills 2 out of the 3 requirements. You know what? Maybe a game should only need 2 out of the 3 requirements to be considered mainline. But if that's the case, what about a game like Sonic Battle? It's not a platformer obviously, but it was developed by Sonic Team and it does tie into the backstory of Gerald and Maria Robotnik, 2 characters who are important to Shadow and the overarching Sonic story as a whole. A game like Sonic Rivals would also be considered mainline using the 2 out of 3 rule. Rivals wasn't developed by Sonic Team, but it is a platformer, and since Sonic 06 got wiped from the timeline, that would make Sonic Rivals the first in-universe appearance of Silver the Hedgehog, so it does have importance to the series' narrative. One of the most interesting games to talk about is Sonic and the Secret Rings. This is a platformer developed by Sonic Team, and while it might not be the most important game in the story of the franchise, the events of the game are at least directly mentioned by Sonic and Sonic Generations. You could say Sonic and the Secret Rings fulfills 2.5 out of the 3 requirements, so could this game be considered mainline? I don't know. I have no idea what a mainline Sonic game is, so I want you to tell me. I already made posts about this on Twitter and on a YouTube community post, but please let me know in the comments what criteria you have for mainline Sonic games. Furthermore, let me know what your list of mainline Sonic games is. I'll be making a part 2 to this video where I look at your comments to try to get an idea of what exactly a mainline Sonic game is. But until that video is finished, you can check out the other Sonic videos that I've done on this channel in this playlist here. That's all I've got to talk about for today though, so thanks for watching y'all, and have a great rest of your day.